So, welcome everyone for this webinar about the ongoing Open EU call for developing ecosystems and supporting cross-border activities. Before starting, I'll give some details about the logistics for this workshop or the webinar. So we have prepared about 2 hours. We have a lot of information to share, a lot of knowledge to share for you. And we have a whole team here behind this setup. So I'm Valto Loikkanen. I'll be doing the presentation and speaking. Here physically with me is also Oscar Di Pasquale, and he will be taking on questions along the way during the presentation, so you can freely address your questions. And he will speak the questions here for the video and audio, so everyone can hear them. But this way we don't have to open the audio. That adds a little bit more challenge to manage the webinar. So feel free to add your questions anytime to the question section. And in addition, joining from our other office from Spain is Oscar Ramirez, and he's also live all the time, and he will be also moderating and commenting on the chat section and chat channel, where you can also express more openly comments or discussions. And he also will be adding some research and background information and links to other materials that may relate to the presentation or also relate to your questions. And this way we'll try to cater as much of the live interaction that we have here going on. In the chat section, feel free to introduce yourself to others if you want. Feel free to share information about your consortiums you're working on, if you like to work with others in this context as well. And after the presentation, we will record this. We will share it with all of the registered participants. And along with additional materials, you will get the presentation materials and additional links and resources that are referred here as well. So with that, I think we are pretty much set to go. Any questions at this point regards the logistics or any of the expectation points or so forth that you would like to raise up front?
Yeah. I don't know, just a presentation. Pauline just present herself, so no questions for now.
Okay, good. So I'll stop periodically, and Oscar, maybe you can raise a hand if there's a lot of questions, but periodically I will stop to check on the questions, and hopefully we'll have plenty of time to dialogue and Q&A also towards the end. But as we have a lot of material to cover and we try to share as much value in this webinar as possible, let's just get started. So just brief introduction to myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur for more than 23 years actually. I've been building ventures and building companies in US, in Europe, in Asia, and I have my fair of successes and failures for accumulating enough learnings. I'm currently actively a portfolio entrepreneur and also senior advisor here at Startup Commons. We have 10 companies that we are actively developing in our portfolio entrepreneurship approach. In addition, I have more than 10 years as a support provider, providing mentoring advisory to entrepreneurs directly, training other trainers, advisors, business, and developing support services in various ecosystems. as well as on being part of a broader ecosystem development already for 6 years, as well as 4 years for European Commission Horizon 2020 designing these actual calls. Not this specific one because I would be biased on that, so I couldn't join, but many others, specifically access to risk finance and other instruments, so have a broad understanding of the topics and subject matter at various different perspectives, from private side, public side, from past and current, and so forth. With Startup Commons since 2014, we have worked with 25 ecosystems at the ground level so far. So in our work, we try to focus on activities where what type of challenges are ecosystem specific and what type of challenge and solutions and tools can be more covering several different ecosystems geographically or in the perspective of various business verticals. So why do we do this? We see entrepreneurship-led innovation as the most positive and powerful driver to grow economies and develop and push societies forward. And specifically in startups, this focus and drive and energy is really encapsulated in format that is very agile and effective in delivering those innovations and finding solutions to problems at various scale. Regardless of many startups failing, still several of those concepts live also and are then replicated by others and spreading this way as well. So even the failures are contributing significantly for the society at large. So because of these reasons, we have had a challenge to really try to focus on how to scale the entrepreneurship and innovation. So how to find scalable ways to make as big impact for innovation, entrepreneurship and startups as possible. And these are the background to really understand why do we operate in the ways we operate and why do we have so specific focus on one hand on our activities, specifically scalability and some of the core concepts that we'll go through, but also why do we have so broad offering at the same time that we don't directly ourselves facilitate to end users, so to speak, the startups and so forth. So hopefully we'll be able to cover this with enough detail. So the startup ecosystems are really the key engine for enabling entrepreneurship, and that's why we focus on helping the startup ecosystem development. They really create majority of the jobs, they attract talent, they give opportunities for younger people and also those who are in between their kind of next career moves and so forth. And then the core action, then how to really make ecosystems effective. There's many things that can be developed, but the single most effective thing is to improve the connectivity and matching of activities and all of those different things that go into how to make the network connectivity very effective. That's the main key contributor for growth. So these are the reasons why we have so specific focus on our own core activities. So our mission is purely to help scale entrepreneurship and innovation by empowering ecosystem development with common open framework, global best practices, and digital transformation for systematic and more data-driven development. The market from our perspective is that in the world there's more than 1,000 cities that have more than 500,000 population. So there's many ecosystems to really work with. So therefore we are not stuck with any single one. We are working with any ecosystem who are serious, committed and motivated to try and develop their ecosystem forward. There's another 4,000 and more ecosystems or cities having a population between 100,000 and 500,000. And in this case, the size, the impact of size is merely a factor of what types of activities ecosystems are having and what should be their strength or what may be their challenges. And depending on the size, there can be, sub-ecosystems within the ecosystem in one city already or the neighboring cities. But the main problem that we focus on is that every one of these ecosystems are struggling with this fragmented ecosystem information and connectivity problems. And we feel that this is a problem that if we are able to contribute this on a global scale to improve the network efficiency within the ecosystems themselves and even more broadly between the ecosystems, that can be the biggest single contributing factor that we can do for innovation entrepreneurship. So our grand vision and to last time, this is not something that can easily be achieved, but this is what really drives our passion and drives our focus, is to help digitalize, connect, and enable real-time data flow within and between startup ecosystems globally. And there's many steps to get to this vision, and all of these activities that we do are aligned to help contribute for this main vision, while they are also independently effective as such. So the strategy part, how we do this, is also that we have a very neutral role to facilitate, develop and improve and license open standard frameworks in a scalable way, including startup education, innovation, entrepreneurship education, shared knowledge, best practices, and most importantly then finally also the digital solutions to help enable the data flow within and between ecosystem with the help of local ecosystem developers and operators. So our offering or the key activities that we focus on is one is helping to create more open shared global standard for innovation entrepreneurship education. A second part is to provide consulting and knowledge share to partner with the ecosystem developments on the ground to bring our global perspective and global best practices by those who are sharing their own practices and by those that we are developing to help get resources and tools elsewhere for more efficient resource utilization between ecosystems instead of everyone having to create everything by themselves over and over again. And finally, for digitalizing the core activities and enabling the data to flow. So quickly covering the education component, we have the common framework. We use this free open standard. So it basically means that it's published under Creative Commons. Anyone can use it as they like. Anyone can edit, make versions out of it. Anyone can contribute and give us suggestions. And we occasionally update the framework when we get great ideas or great inputs and publish a new version also from our side. And the core of this is the startup development phases and communication about what startup is and so forth. So the big confusion in the startup world is that it's still very relatively new term when we specifically in global context, and there's a lot of people who are still assessing to kind of grasp with that. It has also evolved a lot since it has been spreading, initially starting from the US venture capital industry perhaps 30, 40 years ago, and specifically coming from there. But when it has started to spread the world, it has get much more, I would say, global standard meaning, but it's still reshaping. And that's why there's a lot of misconceptions even on the terminology level. And that's one of the key parts that we focus as well. So here's a quick snapshot how we kind of separate these commonly seen terms between what is a startup, what is a scale-up, and what is a small business. And this just gives a quick snapshot framework that on one hand there is a growth ambition, and on the bottom side there's scalability or low growth ambition or lack of scalability. And then on the left side we have unvalidated business model, and on the right side we have market validated business model. So a startup is pushing a new, testing a new business model, an innovation, and trying to pass it to be market validated and then become a scale up and starting to scale. At the same time, scale up can also come from a small business or from an SME. Specifically, a typical situation is ownership change in a family company, when there's more ambition by younger people to make some change, and they can start to also scale that company, or perhaps converting a coffee shop into a franchise model, and that can also become a scale through that way. So this is how we help to kind of bring conceptual understanding and clear kind of simple tools to communicate and get quickly on the same page of things that we are talking about. This is the core open framework of all of our activities, where we have, in addition to the terminology, we have combined different key terminology that exists in the startup world, and we have created more understandable format to see startups' journey through these different phases, as well as the support functions, kind of key focus areas on formation, validation, and growth, and then added the key terminology that you commonly come across in the startup world, but put it in such order that their kind of relationship and their relevance at what the specific phase they belong to is more easily to consume. With this framework, it can then be used to basically not only see and identify and ask, or for entrepreneur themselves to point at what development phase they are, but it also creates a whole language for everything else as well. For example, a business angel can clearly define that I'm only interested in investing between 1 and 2. If you are on 0 or -1, you're not relevant for my ability to support you yet. Or if you're already in 3, you're more relevant to VC funds. We are not extending our capital to that far. Or being that for support services, let's say the most common high volume activity in any ecosystem is startup events, to be able to label all of the events and support functions based on to what development phase they specifically cater for. For example, to get a company to support to get them from -1 to 1, or to get a company like an accelerator service from 0 to 2. So this is just the notion of this tool. One more item in here is that is important to understand from startups is that a lot of the support functions focus on the top level part, which is more from idea to product to business, and there's a big need and lack of typically support services on how to come from talent to co-founding team and how to build an organization to 10 to 50 to 100, maybe 1,000 people, which is the main reason why there's so much support going for startups, because we want them to be significant on their impact on creating jobs and economic growth. They can't do that with 5-people team. They also need to know how to scale their organization, and this organization development actually needs much more support than is typically available in an ecosystem. So a big part of helping to avoid failures when developing startups is about finding the balance between different areas that need to be developed in the startup. So this is also one kind of image to help assess how well balanced the startup is at any given state of their development. And this is again just a simplified tool to try to communicate as much value in as simple package as possible. The curriculum itself that we have released under open source way, so the same way under Creative Commons, that the actual framework is that the whole curriculum, all of the materials is available for free for anyone to use in their own education or training or ecosystem workshops. And they can improve, edit, remove material, or make contributions for the common material. And this way we will also keep improving that. All of the contributes that come in will add to the curriculum and give credit back to those who added to the material. The Growth Academy is specifically targeted for innovation entrepreneurship, basically to help develop startups. It includes these 5 modules, and actually we are just now going through these modules. We have gone module 1, module 1B in a webinar format, and we are going to do the module 2, 3, and 4 also in a webinar format. And the webinars themselves are paid at the moment. We are considering releasing them later on, or potentially free, or at least through different means once we get them recorded. But for now, we are covering some of the production costs with those. So the model is combination, how to use this material is combination of traditional offline training and then the e-learning component. So we'll create the training materials, we'll work together with others, whoever want to contribute for the training materials, we'll share it under Creative Commons, but then there needs to be in-person coaching, advisory, training, where we then also create this certification model that anyone who wants to be also endorsed about their ability to deliver good quality training out of this material, they can get themselves certified if they want. There's no obligation. It's not dependent whether you can use material or not. Commercially even, that's okay. So this certification model is to help scale the availability and to be able to offer opportunities in offline where people can go more into details, whereas the e-learning component can make it available 24/7 in any global location in the world for self-learning, and it creates an opportunity to also start the in-person conversations more direct into specific topic if both parties have consumed the e-learning component. In addition, it's possible then, of course, when you go to a coach or you have a meeting with, or you take a part in a workshop, that then you can also go and consume more of that material just to remind yourself of some of the topics that were covered on live, but you only maybe have slides available. So this is how we are delivering this one. Consulting is then specific, where we take part in those consortiums or those individual organizations or teams who are working to develop the ecosystem locally. Whether that's a bottom-up activity or whether that's top-down activity or something in between, well, we are there to help support, as long as it's looking at the whole ecosystem level or about specific enabling some support functions where there's more interest to also see what other support functions are available through other ecosystems, and more of this collaborative development of those services. In ecosystem development, the key really is to help bring structure, help bring efficiency into how the ecosystem is developed, and get it more organized, get it more systematic, and then develop this systematically over time to improve it. The startups really are dependent on two ecosystems that are connected with startup ecosystem. On one hand, there's innovation ecosystem, where innovations also live without any ownership or any company. It can start as a research and it can go even through a public sector. It can be independent researcher developing it forward, not intention to do business out of that. It can be, in a kind of coming from a workshop, an idea that nobody develops forward. It can be IP that is licensed out of a bigger company and things like that. On the other side, on entrepreneurship ecosystem, that of course includes all types of entrepreneurship, not just innovative one, not the team formatted startups, but also freelancers, lawyers, accountants, all types of entrepreneurship, taxi drivers, restaurant owners, and so forth. So the startup ecosystem basically lives and utilizes the best ingredients of these two worlds, both from IP side, so ideas, intellectual properties, and also from the most driven entrepreneurial people that then form teams and then they go through these development phases. Within this ecosystem, there are certain type of things, and through that journey on these two sides, on idea to business side, from talent to organization side, that every single startup has to go through. They have to create something and then they have to validate it, that it works, or that the commitment is there and so forth. And here's how then the support services connect to this. If we look at the ecosystems overall, typically the beginning part is more public services, publicly funded services heavy. And when we go more on the more mature side, then it starts to move more on the private side, capital, private side partnership, private side channels. And there's a linear, gradual kind of change in between. In the beginning, the knowledge is more important. Later on, it's money and connections to help scale. In between, there's learning by everyone. And the validation hits there on the beginning. And that's really the point also where things either start to work or they don't work. And then there's options to stop, restart, pivot, or whatnot. But if they pass validation phase, then they really become something interesting for everyone. The ecosystem itself involves these kind of different segments of actors. So in the center, we have the business creators. So that's kind of a generic term we use to include, of course, the founding team members, but also those who take like board seats and are more long-term with the journey. So including investors, when they go into a journey, they are there for several years. So those all are more connected to the journey itself. And then the second level is the support providers that more look at the specific development phase, focus on that, spend a shorter time with individual venture, contributing for that, but do that in higher volumes. So that's the support providers function. And then there's this one bigger and missing and unclear role that is starting to formalize. Some have very clear activities here. Many have some type of activities, but not enough sustainable resources available, which goes into this how to orchestrate and how to develop the whole ecosystem. In some places, it's driven by private side. In some places, it's tried to driven by governments. And from our perspective, it's not so much about who's driving it. It's much about how they're doing it and who are they inviting to take part in that. And ultimately, in all of this is also then, how does this look like in the digital world? How does the data live inside these activities? And these are the two focus areas that we specifically focus, that we think will have the biggest impact that we can focus on from our role to help get working. So if we look at ecosystem as a funnel, this is how things develop. It's not a closed pipe, of course. Companies come and go. They can spend shorter period, longer period at any development phase, depending on what they're building and what are the resources and learnings. Also, companies can come from another country after validation, before validation, or they can also leave to another ecosystem. So they are very fluid in that sense. Here's a little bit of perspective in a kind of a snapshot. This is generalized snapshot of various different types of ecosystems, and also from a different maturity level ecosystems. So this is just an indicative statistical perspective to give some idea of the types of volumes, that how the volume passes through the funnel, and what kind of activities then should be kind of available. And you can multiply that number with any kind of taking it from a population perspective and multiply that to get to kind of the types of numbers to look into, not to benchmark so much, but as a guideline, for example, of how much of certain type of support functions are needed for different types of development phases, and therefore also guiding the type of approach that should be applied to be able to cover certain levels of these numbers. It's also showing kind of how the evolution between initially ideas, they don't have to be dependent whether it becomes a startup or growth company or not. That happens more through the learning, or then by design, depending on the founders. The way to measure the ecosystem, that is a key part of the data as well, but also from any financier's perspective is how do you measure the activities, how do you measure the ecosystem, and how can the activities be calculated, whether the return of investment, whatever money that is, and the public money, which is all of our collective taxpayers' money, should be most carefully considered when spending that money into development of what type of results, not only what results happen through the project, but what are the more permanent results that they were able to establish. So on the consulting side, this was just a quick snapshot of the types of things that we will have. And for example, the growth advisory module 1B that we did yesterday, and the recording is available. That is like 3 hours of just from the ecosystem development part alone. And that is still a very short snapshot of the available material and content we have. In an offline workshop, what we usually do when we start working with the new ecosystem is that we work with the contact person, the key contact person of the ecosystem who wants to make this happen. And we do this two-day workshop, where on the first day we focus on collecting info, talking about the information that is collected beforehand about the key elements of the local ecosystem, as well as then covering the knowledge part. And then we have a night in between or 2 days in between, and then we come back for a second day when we then focus on defining what is the vision and the milestones for the ecosystem development, for the ecosystem in question, from the eyes of SWOT approach initially, and then drawing that big picture of how that ecosystem should look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. It's more important to know what the picture should look like to be able to get there than the pace and real activities in each of the year how to get there. And knowing how the picture should look like will help them to make decisions also along the way. So just like startups have their development phases, startup ecosystems also have certain maturity levels that we can kind of, through our experience, we have seen them going through. And with the initial kind of assessment, we can pretty quickly see about what phase the ecosystem maturity is, and therefore we can also recommend tools that are most suited for that type of maturity level, because there are always certain types of things that should be created first, more like foundational things, before you start building a house on top of that, because certain things lead to certain other things, and this is an important perspective. So that you can kind of on your own also try to assess your own ecosystems, we have this kind of very quick summary to help do that as well. So, okay, I'll stop here. I'll check for some questions, and then we'll dive into the actual call details and related things here.
Until now, no questions. I mean, we have already covered everything. So if you have any other question, please ask now.
Okay, good. And of course, you'll get the materials, and we are happy to answer the questions also afterwards and along the way. So let's go into this call specifically. And in addition to the material that we shared in the Eventbrite page and in the blog that was linked on that page, and we'll send you the links also afterwards. Perhaps Oscar Ramirez can also add those links in the chat. But I also then have spent quite a bit of time together with our team here to also try to dive deeper to build more holistic understanding of what is the really behind this and what's the really essence, and what the materials that I'm covering here is also like links to where you can actually go check yourself and also create your own perspective of that. The key thing here is the call deadline is 28th of March next year, so that's pretty much when the good quality consortiums and teams should be in place. I'll start first. Well, here I want to say that one of the key part of this call is that it should contribute directly to these two main items or programs under European Commission. The Startup Europe initiative, that is like it's almost like a facilitator between various Commission, because Commission has this, what are they called? These different departments, big departments that provide funding to specific types of things. But because entrepreneurship and innovation is cross-cutting, then Startup Europe is there to basically help connect these different departments, finance and the innovation part, and contributing for those different things. So it's kind of like a coordinator specifically for Startup Europe and for startups, but also between the different departments of the Commission and different funding sources. Innovation Radar is then all about data. It's all about all the information that they can pull out of all the innovation activities that European Commission is funding on the Horizon 2020. And they are developing this as the primary tool to have information about what's happening and to cater that information back, not only for their own needs in developing instruments and so forth, but for the broader whole European ecosystem as a whole. Because of the being in the EU call, I want to cover one of the case study that we took part earlier, and there's a full link and a lot of details available about this as well. But just a snapshot, this was an IEER, an Interreg Europe funded flagship project with budget of 2.3 million euros, and it had 10 regional ecosystems from 10 different countries collaborating together to work towards identifying best practices, documenting those best practices, cross-learning from each other. And these ecosystems were very different in size, different in their maturity levels, having very different types of services. But it's important to, when developing these projects, it's always as much as you can leverage specifically the projects that are already being funded by European Commission should be seen as a positive thing, because unfortunately we also see a lot of projects that are consortium and things that are created that haven't even researched what EU has funded in the same subject matter elsewhere, let alone then include all of the outputs of the previous project to put as the starting point for a new project, to communicate continuum and not just creating same things over and over again. This is a very important part, so I encourage everyone to take a really deep dive to this material. I know it's very good. There was a big effort done by the project to document a lot of these learnings, and it's freely available. It's public material. So we took part in here in this project specifically to help bring seek the commonalities, look into ways of communicating these support services, bringing the open framework there to help also not only to structure how the information goes in, but also for readers how you can consume that information and knowledge. And they have also added great ideas for what they would have done next if the project would have had further finance. And then there's great specification, great ideas there as well. So I encourage people, every one of you, to look at this and at least refer to this or individual pieces that may be relevant for whatever you are looking to design for your consortiums and the types of activities you are looking to do. On the EU funding call, just a quick keep some selected key points. As mentioned, it's really actions under this headline reinforce the Startup Europe and Innovation Radar incentives. So if you don't have those covered, if you don't have those mentioned, if you haven't studied what the purpose is of these two initiatives, what these main initiatives' key targets are, then definitely that would be a missed opportunity in the documentation or in the proposal. Insight and intelligence from the innovation radar is to be used to detect EU-funded innovators who face the biggest market opportunities. So that's one part. The other part is, of course, the challenges that the innovators or the startups are struggling at the moment, and then matching more effectively services for them to get them to those that become the biggest opportunities. Here, it's underlined and stated in the presentation that they did in the, I think a month ago, 2 months ago. There's a video available to that enhancement of innovation radar data by merging with relevant third-party data sources is very welcome. Projects should demonstrate sustainability of proposed actions beyond the life of the project. Now, anyone who has worked with any kind of public project funding knows how this goes and how much there is. When a project starts, there's a high ambition, there's good targets, there's great activities, a lot of great things are created, but because it's project funding, the continuum is the challenge, and the sustainability specific for that project and related activities. A lot of value is often lost because the project was not designed to be attached to something that is sustainable by design. Usually this means private side, this means some existing structures, and that's why it's also important that these connect to the innovation radar and the Startup Europe, so that it doesn't become an activity that is done, is run, and then when the resources are dried, the sustainability was not considered in the beginning. Usually it happens that sustainability comes as an afterthought towards the last 6 months of the project, but usually at that time the people resources are already looking to the next project or the next job, because that's just human and that's just normal. So it's very important that the sustainability factor is considered at the very beginning, is communicated clearly, and it's logically possible. If it's just that we believe this will happen, it should be more concrete than that. To really, the best way is to attach it to something, even in the sense of making it open source or Creative Commons, and making sure that the material gets into place where someone else will look after that. Otherwise, they'll just disappear into mystical Google Drives and so forth, and all the value is lost. And it's not that others then could even if they would want to, they can't find them and they can't utilize them. And another key point with that is that if it's not clearly stated that this is public material, it's Creative Commons, then there is an IP issue. Was it cleared that this material can be used? Does it include intellectual property of a third party that was in the project and therefore it cannot be used? So very simple things, very big impact. So this is what I want to highlight here. The main description of the call is listing these cross-border activities. So among 4 to 5 startup ecosystems connected by each project, and at least half of them will be located in less developed ecosystems. And the less developed was referred as there's some ranking list where it's not only about the startup ecosystem, but also the digital level of the ecosystem. And there was, I think, 2 different rankings that were available. They are linked in our blog post to check kind of like how the consortium should, from what regions are a good match here. The project should develop a single online entry point to each one of the ecosystems and connect them to Startup Europe one-stop shop. So this is a clear request, and if not addressing this request, I think it's not as strong as because this is in the main description. So usually what this online entry point means is that each ecosystem should have some kind of ecosystem portal, or they should have some kind of ecosystem hub where anyone from any country coming to trying to read into the ecosystem, or a person that used to work in a big company and is looking to become an entrepreneur, wants to build a startup, how they will see the ecosystem first time in their local setting. So that means that there should be something like that existing, and it also means that there should be someone whose responsibility it is to sustainably maintain, improve, and develop that. And then it should be also connected to Startup Europe. And this should basically, all ecosystems should look after this type of direction, because that's a big part of course, the whole European agenda. Then there's some examples of what type of cross-border activities are specifically welcomed, and any of the cross-border activities, everyone who's doing cross-border activities have the same challenge. How do they read what is the other ecosystem look like? Who are the key people? Who are the key organizations? What are the key contact points? And so forth. And then there are some additional wishes that, based on the video that I listened, was that particular focus will be placed on stimulating partnerships between bigger corporates and scale-ups. So they have specifically used scale-up here, not a startup. So it means that the validation of the business model should exist already at some level, and connecting them with corporates. And this is, of course, from corporate perspective, it's outsourced innovation, potential acquisitions for startups or scale-ups at this phase. It's an exit opportunity, or it's a great partnership opportunity to global channels of existing customers fitting for the product. And then even more extensive I would say far-reaching, which how they themselves describe it, that if there's ways to connect them, startups, or this combination of startup or scale-up working with corporate to also pitch into the public procurement projects, that is also very much recommended, because there's a lot of money flowing there, and the Commission really would like to try to guide some of that money towards more of enabling innovation, scaling, rather than just feeding the existing corporations. So this is the main description, and some additional points in going a bit more detail is to increase connectiveness among members of deep tech startup ecosystems and their companies. So when we talk about deep tech, we talk about, of course, things like AI, very data-heavy platform economy models, businesses that are more deeper technology, because the traditional technology is already so commonplace. So creating, another, iPhone application or another project management system is not really deep tech anymore. So it needs to go further than that. And Europe has significant capabilities at the research level in this, but not so much innovation and market-facing innovations that it should have, and this is why it's here. To the larger European business ecosystem seeking maximum synergy. So this is very obvious point, but the challenge is how to actually accomplish that and how to get to that. Again, the single entry point, connecting and with additional information, and also the involved the ecosystems, digital innovation hubs, because similarly like the innovation ecosystem and entrepreneurship ecosystem and startup ecosystem, they live in harmony, but they are all a little bit different. The digital innovation side is also, of course, it involves big and small players working together already, but they are all focused and connected from this digital aspect. So to work with that, and the reason they are highlighting this and bringing that more into the mix of Startup Europe is the innovation radar, because they also see that they somehow need to bring more closely not only the offline soft activities and face-to-face types of activities, but everything that happens on the digital side and the data that can help to enable these activities. So they also slowly wanting to bring more of this digital single market thinking also for the startup ecosystem development. Cross-border activities, including connecting tech entrepreneurship with potential investors and so forth. This was also in the description. And then this fifth point, this was actually very funny to see that in this video about innovation radar, there was a mention that we have 3 suggestions for you: data, data, and data. And those were the only 3 suggestions on that presentation. So consortiums, 4 to 5 ecosystems connected by each project. I was trying to really read into a funding cap per consortium, and I couldn't easily find it. I took some time to really try to find that, but I saw in past project that was the material available at Startup Europe that the consortiums per project used to be smaller, 3 to 4 compared to 4 to 5. And in past they had it stated in the call itself that it was up to 1.5 million per consortium, but now in the same document for next round it's not stated. But maybe these numbers give some kind of guidance into the type of funding that one consortium should aim for. Perhaps it's 2 million up to 2.5 because there's more consortium, more members per consortium. But this is just my speculation. So don't hold on to that too strongly. Of course, you can always ask from Startup Europe team, but if it's not stated, I don't know if they have a specific number there. Innovation radar. So this innovation radar, as mentioned in the presentation by O'Neill from European Commission, it's a data-driven methodology to deliver intelligence about public funded innovations and innovators about their market readiness. Yeah, there was the comment of data and the enhancement of innovation radar by merging with relevant third-party data sources is welcome. And there's a link for the presentation that was given in that video, and on the blog post there's also a link to that video directly from the event that they held to talk about this call. Here's a description directly out of the video. I wrote it out. That is basically justifying the data part and how do they consider that data and why it's so important. So basically, using this analogy that it's the beating heart of the ecosystem, and it's the data can just improve that. Additional further details is pretty much kind of repeating some of these, but I'll put them anyway here as these are more kind of directly from the text. I'm not going to read this. Some other points to identify really this how to measure the metrics and the KPIs should be very well thought and considered, and also the baseline should be known. So what is the starting point to improve, and how much were those improved because of the activities during the project. In addition, we did some deep dive into the past project learnings, looking at some of the previous calls, some of the previous projects and their outcomes, and if they had learnings listed, then I tried to find those as well. So this was interesting this was one of the first or earlier calls where they were heavily kind of pointing that please don't build another platform because there's plenty of tools out there. So if we kind of look at how they have evolved themselves, now they are basically insisting that everyone should at least have some kind of gateway, a hub or a portal to maintain the access, the visibility to the ecosystem. But the statement nevertheless is true that there shouldn't be need to create or replicate tools that already exist. So it's mainly to focus on those types of things that don't exist. But of course, there's another aspect to this. I think it is important to also recognize that most of these tools used are not really European. And if there are great European companies that are actually creating new tools or improved tools or even disrupting tools that are better than these, but that should be shown by the market, not decided by us or EU or so forth. The market has proven that they are in the growth path, then for sure I would recommend to support the European companies, and we are more than happy to help any company from any part of the world to get their own platform or get their own software or get their own tool to also be available in another country or in another ecosystem. So we very much, because that's just growth, that's growth for everyone. for those who are creating the tool and efficiency for those who need a tool. So we are more than happy to also find and share and communicate about great tools that are used in the ecosystem. From another presentation, European Digital City Index, this was very much focused on trying to read into the data and kind of make assessments and comparability between the cities. And one of the general lessons, because this was a lot about data, is that data collection is always more of a pain in the neck than you can think. Okay.
Yes, we have already a couple of questions about Alex is asking how is the grant distributed between consortium? Yeah.
So as mentioned, I tried to find a specific number for that. So I don't know if they have decided. So it looks to us that they haven't decided any specific number of how much one consortium can get. In the earlier version, there was each consortium up to 1.5 million, but the consortium number was smaller, 3 to 4, and now it's 4 to 5 consortium members. So I would at least assume it's higher than that. So I would say minimum up to 2 million if I would have to guess, but this is not any official statement. So, but it can also be higher, and the right source to ask for that information directly, if there is a number, is of course directly from Startup Europe team, and that's if it's stated, it's public information. So there is no kind of number that they have decided and they wouldn't announce it. So they definitely will, if there is, they will tell what the number is.
Thank you, Valto. Another question from Hans. Where we can find the list, less developed, more developed ecosystem, if there is any list?
In the Eventbrite page where you registered for the event, there's a link to our blog post that is summarizing many of these points. And if you read through the blog post, there is in that blog post is mentioned about this, and there's a direct link to that index. But we'll also send this afterwards, so that's why we have other team here to support.
Yeah, and Shahid is asking if can non-EU join these networks in any capacity?
Yes, good question, and this is also something that that we looked into, because we knew that we also have partners. We work with Vietnam, with Malaysia, with Thailand, in different parts of the world beyond the Europe in our role. And the answer is that yes, they can join a consortium, but the budgeted money towards the ecosystem, that member that is not European, can be it's in the blog post, it's specifically written the number. I'm thinking if it was up maximum 20% of the overall budget. That's the financial perspective. But please check the number from the blog post, and it also refers to the place where this number has officially been stated. And then the other part of that is that it cannot be the type of activity should be European scale-ups or European deep tech companies expanding to another market. So it needs to be that direction type of support. So a soft landing service to do business in Ho Chi Minh, soft landing service to land in Bangalore, to establish your Indian market entry for your scale-up, or related activities for a specific non-European city to support in the form of, for example, local investors in a market investing into European startup looking to enter that market, and these types of activities. So those were the conditions. Within those conditions, it is okay.
Okay, and another question is from Ismail. Ismail, are you going to have a deeper vision on impact measurement in your presentation?
Yes, I'll get to that a little bit. We'll cover the data part, and then we'll look at the KPI part also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. So I'll continue, and as Oscar will stop me if there's piling questions, so no worries. We'll take those in. This was this European Digital Forum or Digital City Index. This was the process they were going through, where they basically had this pain of data collection. So this was the timeline. This was the steps they took, and again, there's a report available. Like each of the projects, they always create these reports. They should be more available, more visible. Startup Europe does their best, but also their own team don't have unlimited resources, like nobody has. But that's a good source of material. But because EU also has a commission, has many different departments and different projects that, as said, have cross-cutting activities anyway, that sometimes it's really hard to find the relevant information as well. Another learning, Digistart, this was also in the Startup Europe. They have this section. The link is here in this slide on the bottom. Main initiatives, data management plan was one. And then also in this European Virtual Accelerator, the core challenge, fragmented entrepreneurial ecosystem in Europe, single nationality startups, no European vision, local limits on access to the co-founders, resources, and so forth. So it's clear, based on that the call is addressing some of the learnings, and it's addressing some of the findings, and the direction is very clear where they're heading, and that should really drive the proposals on one hand. But of course, on the other hand, it's really important that they drive the consortium's own view to what they need in between their ecosystems and also in the real ground level. So of course they should be balanced in that way that it contributes to the key targets of not only the commission but also for the actual things that are needed in this specific ecosystem and in the work between them. So from this background information, really looking our considerations and positioning how we try to kind of take part in this in the most efficient and effective way is the area for the digitalizing part specifically, because we know that's really a challenge for many, and that's why we have also taken it as the most kind of challenging problem for us to work with. But to be able to work on the digital side, we need to have the other components in our work as well, where on one hand we need to find a scalable way to contribute for entrepreneurial and innovation mindset building and the knowledge of all of those who need to understand the process, that then leads to common language, that then leads to more common standards. And then the consulting part, where if there is a need for us, we try to be as little involved in any project as possible, because we are trying to work with so many ecosystems. But when we are needed, we definitely want to make ourselves available. But that's why we also deliver so much of our materials for free and far, because we know that there's a lot of talented people who can just consume the information and work based on that. But if that's not enough, we are more than happy to take part in the projects as well. So if we look at this this development phase map, and as mentioned, there's kind of two ecosystems. There's one hand, there's local geographically based ecosystems per city, per region, and then of course at different levels to national and Europe-wide and so forth. But each of those are very different when the core activities really happen at the city or city region level. Then on the other side, there are business vertical ecosystems, and those are usually cross-cutting, and they become more relevant at private involvement side at the scale-up phase and between bigger companies, because they thrive more on the specific industries. When we look at the kind of the activities just from a geographical perspective, in any country, a city, everyone's trying to attract, come to our ecosystem, come here and invest here, and that's natural. That's just the global competition. But when we look at from the business perspective, if we look at the scale-ups, the companies, their ambition is to try to be as many local markets as possible. So they don't, and specifically when coming from small markets like Finland, or coming from other smaller markets or regions that don't have close by a big market. But even if not considering that perspective, and that's just thinking of deep tech and technology and digital startups and scale-ups, it's more about really being as global as you can from day one, being a born global actor, and therefore you want to be connected to as many ecosystems as possible in the most efficient way to utilize the resources and channels available. So the shared reality that everyone faces is that it's a two-way acting. It's like airplanes. They come and they go, and you have to have good airports. The airport is one of your most competitive advantage in a global scale when it comes to startup ecosystems. How well you have your landing services and your basic arrival and departure services, the better you will do with your ecosystem. And the more connected you can be digitally, the more efficient it can be for those who want to expand or come to your ecosystem.
From Alex, which kind of cooperation and reporting does the grant require from the consortium? Because working with EU Commission can be very heavy. What is the case with this grant?
Okay, let me remind Oscar to come back to that question when I'll look at kind of how we are positioning ourselves here. It's a good time to revisit that question.
Okay.
Okay, so when operating or looking to develop the ecosystem, the key challenge is to how to operate the ecosystem for the benefit of those within the ecosystem, while at the same time maintain the focus in your own ecosystem and understanding and connecting in more live way in constantly evolving other ecosystems. So we already know that when you are trying to even kind of map out and coordinate and get into kind of keep maintaining information of your own ecosystem, and that's already usually a big challenge, let alone trying to understand what's going on in other ecosystems. And that's why it's also important that there are specific functions that really look at the ecosystem as their own responsibility, instead of ecosystems as a side action for some other support function that they do as a primary function. The other part here is, while measuring and benchmarking the results of your own actions and projects with theirs, so other ecosystems, and developing common standards. So this problem is exactly the area where then we try to focus on, so that we don't operate ecosystem level, but we really operate and work between ecosystems and all of the challenges that exist in trying to kind of live with this problem as well. So a little bit more kind of visualization about this business vertical ecosystem and the geographical ecosystems. So it's important to get this kind of mindset because too often times in a local setting, specifically in a small market, they try to cater from specifically sometimes even from public side to all kinds of business verticals as well. Whereas usually then anyway, when the companies grow, they are more private business, private market business. And the business verticals, they don't have geographics. The bigger business vertical ecosystem you can find, that's where you want to be involved and get a good position when you're growing your business. So in that sense, it's important for geographical perspective that public money driven, public side, neutral side should really focus on to try push things and then find the partnerships with private side actors who have more business vertical presence and positions, and even better if there's actors that are already acting more like an orchestrator or ecosystem actor, coordinating some different business vertical as a private actor, because that's also the sources of sustainable contribution and continuum of the efforts of these EU projects. If it's only public funding based, there's no private side. If there is no built-in continuum, it's very hard to make it sustainable. Trying to make it private along the way or trying to find a private party at the end of the project. So that's why usually the sustainability suffers because it was not designed. And then when we look at this kind of from the bigger picture, of course, there's many countries. Inside each of countries, there's city and regional ecosystems. Inside each of the ecosystem, you have the same activities, the same actors, and then you have these different business vertical ecosystems that are cross-cutting through all of this. The connectivity challenge is that if we look at the individual country, we of course already have the country level ecosystem that has less hands-on activities, and then we have city level activities that have most of the offline activities. And some cities are closer together, almost merging, and they may already collaborate, do things together to see more as just one ecosystem. But then depending on the size, you can have states, you can have regions, you have so many different size levels that then there are also regional actors, and sometimes the certain responsibilities of being a neutral actor can even be better if it's a regional level government, because we have to face it that cities also are competing, even when sometimes it can even be against their own interest, because that's just nature of how things kind of happen when not everyone thinks so, kind of complex levels and so forth. So then, of course, this can continue that now we can have a country that also have regions that have cities, and then when it grows, we look at the bigger picture again, we have business verticals that are now cross-cutting multiple cities and regions within the country. And then when we look at the European level, now we can start to see the reality that European Commission is working with and how they would like to see things happen, because this is the perspective. So now we have countries, we have cities, we have regions. Now we have business verticals that are cross-cutting within the Europe. And now it's also much more clear from this picture why it is important to also find consortium partners that are not only regional geographical actors, but that they already have also some kind of business vertical extension to other regions, because in a way it's a certain level of sustainable bridge between two different geographical ecosystems. So this is specifically kind of the thought process consideration that I would encourage everyone to think when they're building their consortiums, is that not only to think city to city, but also do we have a private side actor that is already driving business vertical and is already present in both of our cities or regions. So this type of approach I would really encourage. It helps on sustainability perspective, it helps on dividing the roles of activities, and it communicates more the type of picture you can imagine how things look like from a European level perspective. Then if we think about what type of things are shared, you can think of how do we interact, how do we kind of what things are relevant in these different type of combinations when you kind of narrow those things down, what type of things are shared. So each of these ecosystems have locations that things happen. There's people that belong to multiple ecosystems at the same time. There's service organizations that cater, also providing vertical specific workshops and so forth, and so forth. So there's a lot of shared elements in this. So you can take, let's say the green is a company and the red is an investor, and you can imagine them being present in vertical, in a city, in a region, in a country. That's their physical presence, but beyond the physical presence, they would of course like to be present in as many places as possible, conducting their business or providing their services. So operating models. This goes now on the digital side of how currently the world is operating this kind of two different things. This is like a traditional, I would say a bigger public organization or private organization where traditionally the business side, the economic development side and the IT part are totally separated. So there's very little kind of mutual interaction in the customer interface where these activities would be working very closely together. Sometimes they are even separated to totally different entities or organizations that are like physically separate. And then users have this kind of separate interaction between the technical team, technical support, and then the service side, customer support. So this is kind of a traditional historical perspective how the digital world and applications and so forth look like. Now this is the Facebook world. Basically, it means that there is people and organizations that are the users, and then there's terms and conditions that you accept, and everything else is a black box. But at the same time, they are very much merged. So in Facebook or in Amazon or LinkedIn, they don't separate their business and their digital activities. There is no separate IT department. They live one life to cater for the markets and make things efficient. But these are given models to the markets. So the only thing you can do as a user is accept the terms. And that's not necessarily the right model to global. It's currently the dominating model, but that's why there are many actions to ongoing, both how consumers and how people feel, and also how the regulation is looking at dissolving this kind of problematic situation. And here's how we see this, and here's how we are kind of looking at catering into this type of future and this type of new approach. I'm not going to go too much into details here, but the point is that the digital and business understanding and way to consider operations are more closely merged, and then it's more separated at the level of just the technologies and enabling factors alone, and then all the rules and decisions and things should be done more at the local level. And then there should be collaboration and connectivity considerations between other actors, because otherwise these become silos themselves. So the kind of the global reach and connectivity needs to exist there, but the decisions and data use and those types of things need to be more local hands. So only the enabling technology should be the one that crosses borders. So for this, to make this something like this possible, it needs someone that focuses on the ecosystem as a whole, as a neutral actor, as a moderator, coordinator, secretarial functions, information management, communication, digital and data, and not so much providing the individual services. So if we look at the traditional thinking where the ecosystem activities happen, there's the grassroots, bottom-up activities from entrepreneurs and passionate people wanting to do things quickly and solve things. And then there's the top-down activities, the governmental regulation, the funding of activities that pushes down things and tries to read into what is needed at the grassroots level, providing resources. And the difference between these two is the other one is more agile and can develop things quicker, but is suffering from sustainability challenges because many things that the ecosystem needs are not financially, at least not easy to make financially sustainable. So what is needed is some kind of operator in between who kind of has enough of sustainability side, a long-term thinking, but is also more closely working with more agile and grassroots, and acts also as a neutral communicator in between. So this usually means to be in the common voice of the ecosystem. I think it's in Amsterdam, in Helsinki, we have these Twitter hashtags that are not owned by anyone, but everyone uses when they communicate in the voice of the ecosystem. But someone should look after that hashtag as well. But as a neutral actor, not as a controlling one. And the carrier of the torch for the whole ecosystem, for all of the types of things that are cross-cutting between other geographics and verticals. Main communication channel, matchmaker, connector, looking after the architecture of how the digital side is developing and how things are done in an efficient way, a moderator for developing and publishing common standards that are used. So if we look at this from what's locally important in the hands-on level, there should be a clear mandate by majority of key actors in the ecosystem. There should be shared vision, mission, roadmap of what are we doing, how are we kind of building that picture together. While being a neutral actor with very capable team, so understanding about startups, understanding about the digital world development, understanding about both in the same kind of team, effective to work on that, but governed by the ecosystem actors themselves. So business angel groups, entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, public sector side, education institutions, super service providers should have more of a drive to kind of almost like a board members and looking at how the operative activities are going, developing KPIs, building the reach, and communicating to their own stakeholders what the operator is doing and why they're doing it that way and so forth. And the key then comes, if it's this Startup Europe's hope of the European level one-stop shop, their European startup hub, that in the local level someone should have a similar role that looks after the information management and feed that information also to other ecosystems and for the Startup Europe and for the Innovation Radar. Aligning KPIs within the ecosystem, so if there's a support service for ideation, if there's support service for acceleration, there should be some common standard KPIs that both or all accelerators are using and ideation actors are using, that they on public side, because of if they get funding, they should all have same KPIs. That's only logical. On private side, there should be enough incentives built in. Why do they want to have KPIs towards themselves? And those should be more aligned with other accelerators also in international level, so that they can communicate their own performance in the right way. And there should be sustainable resourcing available, or plan to build towards that at least. And then between the operators and between other operators globally, really building the connectivity within and between ecosystems to make it possible for all of the types of actors interact better and more easier between the ecosystem functions. So whether that's finding investors in the market that you're looking to expand to, or whether that's finding a soft landing service or how you get your visas in place if you're coming from outside of Europe, and so forth. Best practices, creating standards together, data models, how to coordinate what type of data we want to transfer between the services, and what type of APIs we should have, and then documenting that. All of that is a lot of work, and makes only perfect logic that that is something that is not done alone, because when you do it alone, it becomes a silo, and it is at 100% of all the efforts, and it's still not connected to anywhere. When you do it together, the more you have, if you have 10, it's 10% each. If you have 20, it's 5% each, and anyone wants to connect to that because they know that it's already a more common standard. Enabling software, so this is, like was mentioned, any softwares that are then connecting to these, utilizing these data models or connecting to these APIs should be made known for everyone, so that other ecosystems can say, hey, this is already matching with those data models and APIs, and therefore we want to take this software, because then we don't have to do any customization work to make it connect. And then finally, how this very valuable data is monetized. So this is who can use this data, how can it be used, and if someone pays for the use of that data, who gets the money and how the money is distributed. And the key here is that the data should always reside in the hands of the rightful owner. So if it's about me, I should have it. If it's about my startup should have it. If it's about my service should have it. The key here is to access to that data. Per request, you can then open access to your data. And there's monetization opportunities here that are part that the operators are sustainable to enable their sustainability is key. And then, of course, shared learnings and these types of things. So, as a business model for how to operator to sustain themselves, it's a good analogy with mobile operators when there was no cell phones. Yes, there was a time, Oscar, you're so young that maybe you don't remember, but there was a time when there was no mobile phones and there was no mobile operators, and usually many of the operators were actually government, public funded, or they were public organizations, and then they were privatized later over time. Or then some started directly private when the business case was very clear that operator is a good business. But this is kind of a similar situation to establish this ecosystem operator functions in the digital world around managing and coordinating data flow and connectivity between the applications. So ecosystem operators kind of focus areas: effective, sustainable, and systematic development and orchestration with long-term perspective. And then on the other side, digital and data, looking at the software's APIs, data economy-driven considerations. So if we don't believe the European Commission and we cherish that Facebook is already there and it will solve all of our problems, even Zuckerberg himself don't want this responsibility. So once the data, the Cambridge Analytics whole precedental thing got out there, basically he stated these statements officially, that he personally feels fundamentally uncomfortable sitting in California in an office making content policy decisions for people around the world. So we can't just keep pushing more responsibility to Mr. Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, he can't handle it anymore. And at some point, there will not be Mark Zuckerberg. Maybe he'll just, sell his company, his shares. Maybe he won't. Who knows? But we even don't know what's the story of Facebook going forward. And everyone's just putting all the responsibility of all of their private life data. And now we're talking about business data as well. And this is just not that sustainable for sure. There's another statement. Okay, another statement that what I would really like to do is to find a way to get our policy set in the way that reflects the values of the community. So I'm not the one making those decisions. So on the Facebook side, we have the front end problems where there's all kinds of things that we can see and understand, and then there's the back end side that is invisible to most and that most don't consider. But this is really the part where we should consider what it means in the context of the ecosystems and innovation radar and startup Europe and so forth. So Europe's clear goal, digital single market. There's a lot of technologies that are associated in this context. The GDPR regulation that came is actually one of the best things in long term. It has a lot of short-term pain, but it enables many things, and it has really been able to raise the whole privacy issue in a level that people need to start understanding it. The key essence of the GDPR is to really help individuals to move their personal data and the activities that how they interact with an application or service from one place to another. That's basically the whole essence of that, and this is perfectly fitting for the context of how ecosystems should be able to share information about the journeys of companies. Some statistical perspective, how important is this data? It's a big market on its own that it's only coming. So this is all new economy direction. At the global level, this is why the big guys are trying to harvest all the data that there ever exists anywhere, and they are succeeding in that in many ways all the time. But then there's one kind of tricky thing here, that it's very hard to enable the AI activities if there is no structured data to train the AI. And basically it means that there isn't a step that you can take from not doing digital things and having data to jump into the AI game, to utilize the benefits of AI. The data is the kind of the step in between that needs to be taken. The further it's pushed back, the more behind the development will be in the economy if this is not understood. And of course, we already know that data is a lot of power. And well, I guess if innovation radar, they are looking to get as much data as possible, one could say, well, maybe EU wants to get as much power as possible, but well, that's a political debate to be had. From our perspective, the software can be shared, but the data should always be in control of the rightful owners. And that really means that the whole logic of GDPR at the individual level, but same should extend to startups and companies. And they make then decisions at the time when requested whether they share that data. But to be able to enable that, it needs that the softwares already need to be technically connected and working together, regardless of whether the data is flowing yet or not, because that's the only way where this can be enabled. Also, there's many types of data: user data, business data, activity data, statistical data, and so forth, that some of these can be public by default, and some shouldn't be public by default. What it can enable in the context of services, it basically means that it's not only information data, it can also trigger automatic things. So in our minds, by me looking at co-founder and seeing a potential co-founder profile in a feed would be much more interesting, because I know I need the co-founder and there's a potential co-founder, than seeing an ad for something that I don't really need, even if the algorithm thinks that I do. So these are the types of things that what can be done with data is that you can enable all kinds of automatic activities to happen and more relevant information to reach you automatically. But it requires this type of information to exist. Challenge, really the information disconnectivity when we talk about the digital side, but also from that it reflects how to be able to do those types of things like the past EU projects when they're trying to read into the data to make some kind of conclusions or decisions, is that if it doesn't exist, then basically there is limited information. And manual data collection is enormous effort and very complex one because of non-standard data models and so forth. And even when we think that we want to connect these activities, when we all agree that yes, there's still technical challenge to be solved. So the problem of connecting multiple things to each other is really a big challenge. So if we think like as a one actor, I want to connect my application within the ecosystem to all the relevant other applications, it becomes a problematic equation. And let alone taking this to ecosystem level between ecosystems. And just adding more portals and hubs or platforms doesn't really solve the connectivity problem, or the data flow problem. It just actually makes it worse. So the approach that we have capabilities on enabling is to bring this kind of ecosystem connectivity where individual application just needs one connectivity, and then together with all of the actors we develop these data models between them. And basically then if we think of the ecosystem level, it would mean it looked like the kind of the architecture that we are suggesting everyone to have in their minds should look like something like this, where basically each of the operator can operate their own setup within their own ecosystem with the shared data models and connectivity enabled between the ecosystems. And this doesn't work without coming together and working with standards, like the mobile operators have to come together first to enable roaming, and then EU had to step in to lower the price for all of us in the Europe so that we can also use our data plans in another country without being afraid that it's too expensive. And then building the connectivity to this one-stop shop and innovation radar. So this is our key aim, that all of the education part, all of the consulting part also are necessary to help communicate these types of things. But in those other activities, we also, of course, do service design and other things, because each of those will always also have the digital extension, and it should be considered with the logical framework. Startup Commons is a Finnish company with the Finnish background, and majority of internet is powered by Linux. That comes from Finland with open source thinking. MySQL, still open source, the most used database structure, also open source, also comes from Finland. SSH, one of the security levels, open source, comes from Finland. All of these are core components that enable a lot of the activities that now happen in the internet. And there's something in the thinking of sharing an open source, but it shows that in long term these become the supported models, just because they are not dictated by anyone how they should be used, but there is the right level of freedom for everyone to operate, and they only operate because of that. So on the API, just to kind of describe that very quickly, this is how any typical application is, whether that's a CRM tool, whether that's an event system, whether that's a platform, whether that's a project tool, social network. It all has user interface, business logic, some software, and a database. And when we look at this, how the applications nowadays work, it basically all the information in reality move between people, or it's designed for use for the people. But of course, the more advanced applications, they already have API interfaces between them for others to connectivity between the applications directly, and then the information can flow from one application to a user interface in another application. But when we really look at this connectivity problem, if we're looking to connect multiple applications, it really becomes an impossible equation to get working. So therefore, this kind of approach is needed that is more, that only individual application needs just one connection, and through that pipe they can connect to as many applications that are connected to that infrastructure. So, and the key to make this kind of ecosystem always work, it requires common standards, joint data model development work, common APIs, and common APIs that everyone starts to support independently and collectively, and just because it adds benefits to them to be connected instead of being isolated. Here's general technology development trend. There has been significant. This is what the digital fourth industrial revolution, digital transformation. This is what it's all about. There's a huge development acceleration happening because of these technologies that are happening on the back-end side, not so much on the user interface level. That's why it's pretty much invisible to many. But there's a really big developments going on this side. And maybe I pause here to capture some questions if there is some.
We still have that one from Alex.
Okay, so
you wanna cover it a bit later?
I'll skip some of these things and I get back to these maybe later to cover, because there's more of the technical stuff of how the ecosystem always works, and I'm happy to get back to that. But first, I want to cover this perspective of the power of the standards, and the standards can only exist if multiple people together agree there needs to be standards, and they also work together to maintain the standards. We can't do it alone, nobody can do it alone, but standards are needed for making the open sharing, open source, Creative Commons types of models work. So we all know how the world, when it was less connected, what kind of outcomes it created. It created these kind of national standards that then anyone who tries to and moves cross borders know how those feel. And then on the other hand, we know how Wi-Fi feels when we get our devices connected. So that's the user experience level that we can all relate to. National standards, national silos, international standards. So we have the opportunity. We are the ones here. The call directly is catering for looking everything in the way that let's not create local silos, national silos, but really co-create this ecosystem connectivity together. Because none of us can do it alone. We can only support, we can only take our part, but we have very limited capabilities. Each of us does on our independent roles and responsibilities. And it can only come together by us starting to join forces and doing it. So here have 5 kind of key rules we have in regards of developing things together, whether that's within your own ecosystem or whether this is between the ecosystems, is that we first have to understood what can be developed and what are we developing. We need to have measures in place. Are we making progress with our development? Are we making things better or worse? And if we don't have sharing things, if we don't share our own things, they have never chance to become an open source. They have never chance to become commons. So this is the minimum I would highlight for anyone working with any of the publicly funded projects. Make sure that they will have life after the project, at least the outcomes, and that they are findable and they can be built on top of. And at the same time, when you start new projects, seek for those materials, build on top of the learnings of others. And if even better yet with consortiums, and that's all the reason why the consortiums are requested, is that there is a built-in requirement to work together. But we encourage this to go across the consortiums as well. If there are no shared things being worked on, there is no real working together. There's more selling and buying. And the working together means that we have shared assets that we are actually contributing towards, and we are sharing those for the broader audience. So when we have shared things, we can benchmark, we can get resource efficiency, and we can develop them together with much more effective way. There may be communication and other challenges, but the assets keep improving themselves over and over again. So just a quick perspective for the benefits of this. I'll skip. These are just summarizing type and look at the sustainability perspective. So we have this kind of image that we want to communicate in regards of, there's one hand, there's ecosystem maturity to develop, and then on the other hand, this kind of digital transformation or digital enablement to improve and bring efficiency, better information flow, automation, and these types of things. And the more these are developed, the more sustainability opportunity there is, because data is valuable and it starts to bring also additional values for those who want to utilize the data. And then it can be made flow. So coming to our role in this call, and this is in context of what we do anyway as Startup Commons, but in specific to the call and some of the points here. So we are of course sharing this knowledge here and even more on our website, and we can be your knowledge bank to your challenges that you're working. We provide expertise and we develop these common tools together with projects where we are involved. In the actual calls itself, we are not looking to be part of any partner in a specific in a consortium, but just like you are facilitating in your own either community or in your ecosystem, people and companies, and focusing on activities that bring value for them, but that they shouldn't necessarily need to develop every time on their own. So we do this at the between ecosystems level, exactly similar type of position. So one key part that we do is the data modeling part, and then basically that means modeling these people and entities, support service and activities, development initiatives, and so forth. And basically from here going into individual application levels as well. The focus is on what's the types of applications and activities and data that is happening within this kind of ecosystem flow. And then this is basically how it kind of architecturally looks like. So there's service mapping, ecosystem development projects, ecosystem portal, KPIs, measures, statistical view into the ecosystem. Each of those can be separate applications or user interfaces. And then there's the connectivity to support service level applications. There's event systems, evaluation tools, Canvas, business development, project management, business planning tools, accounting, funding platforms, and so forth. And building the connectivity and shared data models with all of these. And into center, there is this GDPR-based user account that can apply at ecosystem level to connect to these different applications and move the data from one user account to another user account in a different application in a way where user is making those decisions. So kind of like an ecosystem level user account. And that's directly in the design of how GDPR wants users to have control of their data. So we, in this call, we are not looking to be a partner in any individual consortium. We don't want to be biased to one consortium. We want to be considered as potential subcontractor in any of the consortiums or multiple consortiums. And because that is natural part for us to be neutral facilitator for solving same problem for within the consortiums, within individual ecosystems in the part of the consortiums, as well as between consortium members, as well as between different consortiums, because this is exactly what we do anyway. At this point, to contribute, we are coordinating, and because of our reach and ability, there was more than 100 people registered to this webinar, and so we have reach, so we want to facilitate so that as many know about the call, the targets and the goals of the call, and also have information that they can be helpful for creating the projects. We want to facilitate to try to help people and members to find each other. And with some potential consortiums and members, we're already discussing in some of the more specific details, but anyway, we are not looking to take a position as a partner, and definitely not a lead partner in this. We're also working on our side kind of on a project template document where we try to kind of get some of these key things that we discussed already formalized in a more project format, and then publish that template for others to comment, give suggestions and additions and use in the ways they want to see fit. And we encourage anyone who's working on their projects to consider sharing at least the parts that are relevant when it comes to connecting or these interconnecting interfaces between ecosystems, so that we can help communicate between consortiums plans also that what's happening and what's being developed, and maybe finding like collectiveness between consortiums that can only look positive from the eyes of Startup Europe. So there is no downside in that. The more there is the silo thinking when it comes to interfaces or applications and so forth, the more complex it is also from Startup Europe side. When the consortiums are further along, we'll see if and we make more commitments, mainly our time-wise, how we can divide our contribution to support the consortium developments. And our target is to be an active subcontractor partner, at least in one project. We want to be involved and leveraging this knowledge and kind of bring this thinking present into as many as we can extend ourselves, and to really offer our support to consortium model, standardization, developments, and these types of things. And we also hope to work closely with Startup Europe once the projects start, where we can hopefully leverage also their resources, where they can take hopefully also some role in the standardization, coordination types of activities and so forth. As we are also discussing with likes of Kaufman Foundation in the US side and some of the similar type of bigger global financier organizations doing foreign aid types of funding and so forth. So once we get this templated model working or published, we also hope that it's also in these consortiums involve public side actors, NGOs, and private side actors, because everyone is needed when we look at the connectivity and specifically the sustainability perspective. So that's it. On the KPI side, there was the question.
The KPI, no, it was about, the question was what kind of cooperation and reporting does they want to require from the consortium when it comes to the EU?
Yes, so basically in any consortium there's the 4 to 5 consortium members, and there's always a lead consortium partner. So the one who's the lead consortium partner will have the biggest responsibility, but also some additional budget should be counted in the plan itself to cover the extra effort that the lead partner takes when it comes to managing the financial side, moving the money and all the reporting and auditing and accounting perspective. So I highly encourage that this is specifically a role that fits best for the public actors. So those who are in the center of the ecosystem, geographical ecosystem, and then recommend more specifically the private or association type of organizations to not take a lead partner role, because then this way they will have wider role in the reporting. They will still have a role to take part, of course, into the reporting, but it's not the main responsibility. And then because there's an opportunity also to be a subcontractor, basically just to provide services for the consortium or for the project, then that is just a normal business relationship, and that's also more neutral. And then of course the consortium themselves make sure that all the subcontracting requirements and clauses are clear when buying the subcontracting or when interacting with any external parties to contributing for the project. But the subcontractors can bring credibility and bridging these different things as well, and additional expertise. And then last but not least, there's of course the ability to be just affiliated, and basically means that then none of the budget is directly put into the use of the affiliated party, but the affiliated parties anyway referred into the documentation and can contribute in kind also for the project. And this is specifically relevant for bigger private companies, considering their business vertical contributions. I don't think most of them would ever need any kind of funding from EU, or then they should be considered a little bit perhaps problematic situation, that if they are taking such a coordinating role in the business vertical and they are dependent on finance, then probably they're not as competitive as some other actors. But then because they are private vertical side actors that are still very new, they very much are dependent. So for them, we recommend to consider subcontractor role, or then potentially even a partner role, but wouldn't recommend the lead partner role, because that's where kind of the cost effort benefit ratio not necessarily support the private side activity.
Yeah, next one is one question that many people asked. I mean, how do they proceed from here, and who should they contact for assistance with building a consortium?
Yeah, okay.
So the next steps, basically.
Yes, good. Thank you for that. So basically we have We will follow up. We will look at this as a team here to look at the questions if there's a conversation in the chat. You can also definitely send us email, request any specific things that you didn't come to your mind at this point, or when you are working on your consortium documents and so forth. Please reach out to us. In addition, we will do a follow-up to all of that were registered for the event with our own kind of thought process of how we think anyway, how we are moving forward and what we are doing, and inviting people to take part of that. And then in addition, we will send a questionnaire for you asking your suggestions, your ideas, your specific concerns, or any of those types of things that then give us more perspective also of the types of things where we can then kind of summarize those and maybe write a blog post or a follow-up document to help basically communicate some of those points. And then in that we will also ask if you are interested in if you're leading a consortium and need members, or if you're interested in joining some other consortium, and try to do some matching on our side. But for that, we need your permission. So even if we have all of your emails, we can't just, send everyone a CC file. But if we ask your permission, then we can open the conversation more between, and also if you tell a little bit more of whether you are looking to be a lead, or you are already a lead, or you're a partner, or you're looking to be a subcontractor, you have a business vertical ecosystem and so forth, then we can also try to kind of build a more useful, whether that's a spreadsheet or something like that, to kind of see where you could see a good potential members for your consortium.
Okay, next one from Mara. So the point 3, what cost implications will we incur as well build content to participate in the call?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah. On point 3 of positioning, what cost implications will we incur as well build content to participate in the call?
So it's like from individual partners' perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in general, the project and the consortium project should not be built only for the requirements of what the call is communicating, but of course the maturity of the project should come from the real needs of own ecosystem, and there's probably a big list of development things that the ecosystem would like to develop, and the more highest priority elements there is that matches with the things that the call is about, and has also the more it has support from multiple actors in the ecosystem saying, yes, please help this get better, or this is an identified thing. Then the more it is aligned with this, the better. But then how much should be budgeted for those activities? That's up to like any planning. It's like creating a business plan. It's like designing how long, and considering, do we count it from aiming to be at 2 million as a budget overall, and if we get that budget, how we would divide this between the members and our own responsibilities and activities, and just playing with those in the spreadsheet, and then looking at it from the budgeting perspective, and then allocating it, and then seeing what can be done with that budget, and then building a project based on that, but targeting with those activities that match. Or then if there are already existing projects that are fitting to this, that then already have a budget range, or they have certain targets and so forth, then of course that can be better or an additional approach in the mix of these types of things. And here would be also great if someone has already created something and they know what the budget was and how the project went and how much it cost. in one ecosystem and then doing something similar in another ecosystem, then that would have like all the answers pretty much covered with adjustments to make it in another ecosystem. So that would be a perfect example of collaboration in practice, where it's not necessarily building something new, but actually copying something that was already done somewhere else, and then at the same time trying to generalize that concept to be available for everyone who's looking to repeat that kind of project, including budgets, roles, timelines, activities, communication templates, and so forth.
Okay, thank you, Alto. No questions anymore.
Okay. So I know we are a bit over time already, but if in case you want me to cover the slides that we had to skip to get to also the final point, feel free to raise your hand for Oscar, and we'll do it, or then we'll just move towards closing this session.
Yeah, okay. Samuel raised his hands. And also we have another question. How does the database fill up? How data is gathered?
Okay, good. So, okay, I'll cover the remaining slides, and then I also try to answer to that question along the way. So this is basically, this is an example when we think about this ecosystem OS, how it works, and we think about the user ecosystem level user account, which we call circle paths, but they can be different names in your ecosystems and whatnot. But the key example is given from the example that we can all relate to. It's a CRM perspective, but the application could be any. But here it's a CRM just because it's easiest to relate. We are all as individuals in someone's CRM somewhere, probably multiple CRMs. We don't have access to that data in most cases. And at the same time, many of us in business, we have some kind of CRM. We manage customers' cards where we have to manually update that information. So through that lens, this is how it looks. The CRM looks from the services view challenge, that there's one organization, one CRM. In worst cases, multiple CRM in one organization. And then there's the customers that are in the CRM. And the business solution perspective here is that before GDPR regulation, basically no one or very few had considered that customers could have access directly to update their CRM records in a system. So a step one solution here, what many have started to enable in their CRM is that they kind of open their CRM for customers to pull their own data out per request, because now that's their right and it's the service provider's responsibility. But the question here is that where is the user's data? And also the other part here is that when we look at from the individual's perspective, it's exactly the same picture, but the other way around. As a user, you don't much benefit if you get 20, 25, 30 access to different CRMs where your profiles are, where you're supposed to, even some of them could start sending automatic emails that, can you update your record, or can we use your data to this, can we use your data to that, all with different types of format of question, all with different types of communication, periodical. It's like newsletter problem times more. Like it's not a solution that is from the user's perspective. So the user would look like this, that I would only like to use one application, and then all the CRMs I would handle, or it would handle on the background. But the problem here is that there isn't such kind of application models existing yet, because basically there hasn't been enough awareness in the markets that kind of things would be needed, let alone regulation to support it before GDPR. So many businesses would just say, no, then if you want your data, then we don't want you as a customer, and that's it. That's how harsh it could have been. So from a user's perspective, this is what they would like to get. But it's not as simple as drawing arrows. So the next level would be that, okay, so every CRM would then have connectivity to this my data account, user account. But of course, there's not going to be just one my data account service. That would be like the ultimate dictator of the world. So there will not be something like that. There will be many different operators providing my data services, user account as a service, type of services for medical records, for financial records, and so forth. Until at some point, however, that will evolve, we'll have some more synergies as well. So here's why this ecosystem always is relevant. So it's between kind of like a switchboard to communicate data between these different data sources and data right holders. So basically, the complexity is handled inside this ecosystem OS in the softwares that are available these days, mainly serverless architectures and so forth, that basically even these types of things not too long ago would have been extremely expensive to do. And with the technology racing so fast, a lot of these solutions have become available because of the likes of companies pushing the envelope like Amazon and Netflix. Like imagine how Netflix can stream data to so many households at the press of a button, and it all just works. So there's been so enormous developments on the behind the scenes of the technology that it's very cost effective these days to make this possible. So on one hand, one CRM can communicate to multiple user accounts that are separate, and then users can just choose whichever user account they want to centralize their data for. On the other hand, the same goes that one user account can communicate with multiple CRMs. And again, the CRM can be an event system, it can be a Facebook, it can be whatever application that the interface is designed and the data model is designed to connect with. So in practice, how this works, just to add a little bit more than just those arrows, it goes into that inside ecosystem OS, there's actually this kind of sharing profile. You can imagine it like a Google Drive document or OneDrive document that is actually one master document and one master profile that then different parties update the data in there, and the user then is in control of who have rights to update, or the owner of that, who can update, who can only read the data, who can write the data, and that has automatic versioning similar to the Google documents, that the data is never getting overwritten accidentally by someone without user being able to basically return back multiple versions. So this is how it works. There's a data card that is more dynamic than just a database. And this also means that through this model, also information can be made to be shared from CRM to CRM, from other applications to other applications, if it's about data that is not about the user. So if it's about data that is not in the GDPR regulation or other regulation, this can be KPIs, this can be the service provider's own service description, this can be news, this can be activity updates, and it can be made to be visible in other systems if wanted. By making it available in an ecosystem OS, then anyone who connects, they can basically see what they have opportunities to share to others, what they can get from others, but individual decisions are made at their own interface. No data flows without their own decisions or without them knowing it's being shared. So inside, there's also like seeing like data profiles for any type of data. So this can be investor profile, this can be an event profile, this can be a service profile, and so forth. And this is where the common started data modeling comes into picture, why this is important, but this can also be designed in such a way that the data model can be also proposed from the one who wants to create the connectivity, so it doesn't always need to have a standard. Standard just makes it more efficient. So now basically then it means that this kind of data can be pushed and made flow per request, a different type of data for different types of needs, more than automatically. And now we can already start to see that there's a real opportunity. The more there's structured data, modeled data, also for things like where you can bring automatic matching, automatic interactions, and so forth, that can be further enabled and accelerated with things like AI. So basically, the data here is not in coming from manual collection. It can start from manual collection, but it comes from the systems that it already exists. And then when there's new services created that need a supporting application, and then it starts to capture the data, it can be directly connected to this type of structure when the structure exists. So our role here is to help getting these structures in place and then basically making sure that the data starts to flow. But the master data should actually always reside in the hands of the actual place where it is today, and only the sharing profiles are then for the data that is being shared. But it also means that new applications can be built directly on top of the data that is available through multiple applications, like a portal where the data doesn't have to be manually entered. And then in addition, there's possibility to create like separate script agents. Consider those same as Google bots visiting different websites that can go and extract data with a certain format and feed it automatically to the central system to be available for everyone. That's mainly for open data, public data, where many of the public sector actors are doing that. That is meant to be freely used and distributed. So I will just get back to this. So basically then when we look at this in the context of the call and the consortium, basically this is catering for the wishes and needs of the call makers, data for innovation radar, and to connect to one-stop shop of Startup Europe, and for everyone, every ecosystem should create their gate entry way, and it's all in the context of digital single market and so forth. But the key point, even there's a lot of information about this and a lot about digital part, hopefully you can see that this is the area where we can help you the most. At the same time, we understand startup ecosystems at very deep level. We understand startup support services, and that's why we are very efficient in developing and helping to come up with data models. And we interact with many ecosystems all the time in our daily work. So in this sense, from our position, we are happy to be a subcontracting partner in the consortium. We're happy to help you get there. And the key target, you will already know what we are looking for. You already know what we are working towards. And then you have an opportunity anyway, the bigger budget and the bigger portion of the money should go to the services that actually help on the ground immediately during the project, short time. But these type of things should not be overlooked and only 100% of focusing on local activities, because these are part of the request of the call, and these are just for the making Europe stronger when it comes to digital economy over time.
Yep, we have another question. I think he would like to know if there is any ecosystem MVP that can be tested or.
It's not really an MVP. We have an entire old architecture version where basically a lot of the data models and these activities were built in one application. And that is totally impossible consideration to use something like that when we go to future. Technology has taken giant leaps in between. So the software we spend huge amount of money and huge amount of time is basically a piece of trash at this point. That's the value of it. But all of the learnings we have from actually operating that in the ecosystem context, all the data modeling, all the user roles, all the access levels, data privacy levels, all of the knowledge that we have collected by designing that and operating that is going into the new architecture point. And the key thing here is that this is a type of thing that should happen directly interaction with real projects, real data, real application, collaboration for finding common standards that more people and operations and activities will connect to. So it's more of doing it together in practice, and not, we don't want to be the one who says, here's the application, here's the terms of service, here's the only way you can connect to, because that's what it ends up being if we just start to create a default from our perspective. We want to do it the right way, with the real customer development approach, with real markets, with real projects. And as we add more of those, it has a true validation that there actually is a need for this product and these services. If not, then we shouldn't develop it.
Thank you very much. For now, no questions anymore. So if you would like to ask anything else, please do it now.
Okay, so thank you very much for taking part to this webinar, and we'll make sure to make the webinar recording also available.